Org now. So anybody who's at Mishkon.org is now watching. So if you're at Mishkon.org and not on Zoom, Shabbat Shalom.
Oh, that's great. I never knew about that tab. Thank you.
Yep. So, well, it's a little after, so we'll get started. Kelly, if I can ask, well, actually, I can just ask everybody else. You're able to mute and unmute yourselves. So to make life easier, maybe for everybody, I just ask you to mute yourselves at this time, and then and then when it's appropriate, we'll unmute for everyone. So we're gonna I'll begin by apologizing for obviously where I'm located. I'm obviously not on the Bima. I'm up in Mammoth. Last night I broadcast from the side of the road over by a golf course because that was the only place I actually could get signal. Today actually I'm over at a friend's house on his Wi-Fi. Friend Lenny, who's often with us for Shabbat morning services. You'll see his name up there. So he has a place up here. So that's where I am. I'm up in his loft right now. So, and I'm filthy, haven't been able to shower since Thursday morning, which is why I'm wearing a hat. And I don't think you actually want to see my hair right now. So but anyway, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Happy 4th of July. Begin by putting on our talit, checking our talit, make sure all the tzitzit are intact. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvah v'tzivanu lehitatech b'tzitzit. And we'll begin on page 103, Birkot HaShachar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan asach b'bina lavchi ben yom u'ben layla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani b'tzamo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Shasani ben Chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Shasani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Pokeach Ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Malbish Arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Matir Asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Zokef Kifufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Roka Aretz al Hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Shachsali Kotzor Kihi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Hamechin Mitzadei Gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Ozer Yisrael B'Gvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Oter Yisrael B'Tifara. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Anoten Le'Ya'ef Koach. One moment. There you go. Better sound quality. Baruch Udnenu hayom b'chol yom l'chenu chas rachamim beinecha v'nei koreinu v'tikim lechasadim tovim Baruch atah Adonai gomel chasadim tovim le'amo Yisrael. Right, continue page 112. Psalm for Shabbat. Hayom Shabbat Kodesh Shebo Hayu Halivrim Ovrim Mikdash Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbat. About 4 lines from the bottom of the page. Tzadik katamar hifrach Ke'erez bavanon yizkeshetulim beveit Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenuvon v'seiva d'shenim v'rananim Nihu lehagid ki ashar Adonai tzuri tzuri velo havlatabo. Page 120, Psalm for dedication of a new day. Mizmor Sher Chanukat HaBayit LeDavid. Elecha Adonai ekra ve'el Adonai etchanan. Elecha Adonai ekra ve'el Adonai etchanan. Shema Adonai v'choneni, Adonai heye ozeli. Shema Adonai v'choneni, Adonai heye ozeli. Elecha Adonai ekra ve'el Adonai etchanan. Elecha Adonai ekra ve'el Adonai etchanan. Hafachta mecholi pitachta sakita zrani simcha leman yizmerecha kavod v'lo yidom Adonai Elohai le'olam odeka. Page 122, Baruch She'amar. Baruch She'amar v'haya ha'olam, Baruch Hu, Baruch Oseh v'reishit, Baruch Omer ve'oseh, Baruch Gozer Umkayem, Baruch Mirachem al ha'aretz, Baruch Mirachem al habriot, Baruch Mishalem Sachar Tov le're'av, Baruch Chai la'ad, V'kayam la'netzach, Baruch Podeh Umatzil, Baruch Shemo, Yadam da da dai, yada da da dai, yam di dai dai dai, yada dai di dai dai, yada da 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 dai dai, yada da 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 dai dai, yada dai da da dai da da dai dai, yadam da da dai, yada da da dai, yada dam da dai dai, yada da da dai dai dai, yada da da dai. Yadadai, yadadadai, Baruch Ata Adonai, Melech Mehulal Batishbachot. Continue on page 136 with Ashrei, page 136. Ashrei Oshvei Veitecha, Od Halalucha Sela, Ashrei Ha'am Shekacha Lo, Ashrei Ha'am Adonai Elohav, Tila de David, Aromimcha Elohai HaMelech, Baruch Hashimcha Leolam Va'ed, B'chol Yom Avarchecha, V'ala Shimcha Leolam Va'ed, Gadol Adonai Umuhal Me'od, V'liglato En Cheker, Dor L'dor Yeshbach Ma'asecha, U'gvurotecha Yagidu, Hadar Kavod Hodecha, B'divrei Nifotecha Asicha, Be'ezuz Noratecha Yomeru, U'dolatecha Asaprena, Zecher Rav Tubecha Yabiu, V'titkatcha Yiranenu, Chanun V'rachum Adonai, Erech Apayim Ugdal Chased, Tovan Alachol, V'rachamav Al Kol Ma'asav, Yoducha Anai Kol Ma'asecha, V'chasidecha Yivarchucha, Kavod Malchutecha Yomeru, Ugvuratecha Yidaberu, Lo Di'aliv Ne'atam Gurotav, Uchvod Hadar Malchuto, Malchutecha Malchuko Olamim, Umamshatecha B'chol Dor V'ador, Somech Anai L'chol Hanoflim, V'zokef L'chol Hakfufim, Einei Kol Lecha Yisaberu, V'ata Noten Lehem et Ochlam Be'ito, Poteach et Yadecha, U'masbeh L'chol Haratzon, Tzadik Anai B'chol Drachav, V'chasiv B'chol Ma'asav, Karov Anai L'chol Korav, L'chol Asher Yikre'u V'emet, Ritzon Yarav Ya'aseh, V'yet Shavatan Yishma V'yoshiyem, Shomer Anai et Kol Orvav, V'kol Reshaim Yashmid, Tila Anai Yidaber Pi, V'varach Kol Basar Shem Ketshol Elam Va'ed, V'anachnu Nevarech Ya, Me'ata V'ad Olam, Hallelujah. Continue page 139, page 139. Hallelujah. et Adonai min hashamayim, Hallelu b'meromim, Hallelu chol malachav, Hallelu kol tzva'av, Hallelu shemesh v'yareach, Hallelu kol kuch v'yor, Hallelu shemei hashamayim v'hamayim, asher me'al hashamayim. Yehalelu et Shem Adonai ki hu tziva v'nivra'u v'ya'amidem le'ad le'olam chok natan v'lo ya'avor. Yehalelu et Shem Adonai ki hu tziva v'nivra'u v'ya'amidem le'ad le'olam chok natan v'lo ya'avor. Hallelujah. 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 Vayarim keren moti hilalecho chasidav divnei Yisrael krovo. Hallelujah. Continue page 141. Just trying to see if the melody will work here. Hallelujah. Hallelujah bekodsho, hallelujah berki auzo, hallelujah v'gvurotav, hallelujah kerov gulo, hallelujah beteka shofar, hallelujah beneva v'chinor, hallelujah betofu machol, hallelujah b'minim v'ugav, hallelujah b'tzitz le'shama, hallelujah b'tzitz le'tshua, kol hanshama tehallel, hallelujah, kol hanshama tehallel, hallelujah, kol hanshama tehallel, hallelujah. All right, it worked. There we go. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen v'amen. Baruch Adonai mitzion shivchem Yerushalayim, hallelujah. Baruch Adonai Elohim Elohei Yisrael, osei niflo levato, uvaruch shem kavodo le'olam, v'yimalei kavodo kol haaretz, amen v'amen. Vayivarech David Enecho. On page 142. Baruch Atahu Adonai levadecha. Atahu Adonai Elohim asher bacharta b'Avram, v'hotzeito me'or kasdim, v'samta shmo Avraham, u'matata et levo leman lefanecha, v'charoti mo bri l'teta aretz hachanai, hachiti harami. V'hayam bakata lifnehem, v'yavru b'toch hayam v'yabasha, v'rodfeihem yishlachta b'imsolot kmo even b'mayim azim. Page 143. Vayosha Adonai bayom hahu et Yisrael miyad Mitzrayim, vayar Yisrael et Mitzrayim met al sfat hayam, vayar Yisrael et yad hagdola asher asa Adonai b'Mitzrayim, vayiru ha'am et Adonai, vayiminu b'Adonai uv Moshe avdo. Az yashir Moshe uvenei Yisrael, et ashira hazot ladonai vayomru le'mor. Ashira ladonai ki ga'o ga'a, sus v'rochvo rama vayam, ozi v'zimrat ya vayehi li lishua, ze'eli v'yan vehu Elohei aviromenhu, Adonai ish milchama, Adonai shemo, marchavot paro v'chelo yahara vayam, umivchar shalishav tube'u v'yam suf, tehomot yichas yumu yardu mimslo kamo aven, yemincha Adonai nedari b'choach, yemincha Adonai tirat zoyev. Micha mocha, Adonai, micha mocha, nadar kodesh, narati lo tosef eleh. Adonai imloch leolam va'ed. Adonai imloch leolam va'ed. Ki l'Adonai imlecha moshi b'goyim moshiim behar tzion litzpot et har hesav. Hayta Adonai imlecha v'yadonai imlecha kol haaretz. V'yom hahu Adonai echad u'shemo echad. Page 145 for Nishmat. Nishmat kochai tivarech et shemcha Adonai Eloheinu v'ruach basar. We're in the middle of the page at the low break where it says Ilufinu. All right, we want our mouths to be able to sing out just as the waves of the sea do. We want our eyes to shine like the stars and the sun and the moon. And tonight we should have an unbelievably beautiful moon. And thank God we're not going to have a whole bunch of smoke from fireworks blocking our view of the moon tonight. So that will be really lovely. And actually, I was just, on my drive up, I saw a number of hawks and some eagles up here in Mammoth. And to be able to see them just with their arms spread out, right? As it says here, V'yadenu prushot k'nishrei shamayim. As our arms could even be as spread out as the eagles of the sky. This idea that all of nature has its way of praising God and singing to God. And so we lend our voices to that as well. We lend our neshama, our souls, our breath to that. Ilululu, 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 ilufinu, male shirakayam. Ilufinu male shirakayam. Ilufinu male shirakayam. Ilufinu male shirakayam. Oh, ilufinu male shirakayam. Oh, ilufinu male shirakayam. Oh, ilufinu male shirakayam. Oh, ilufinu male shirakayam. 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 Yes, Nehala lecha neshavecha devarech nemray et shem kodshecha kamor David bar kinafshi et Adonai v'chol karvai et shem kodsho. Hayavatat motozecha hagawad v'chol shemecha hay gibor nesak v'hanor abenorotecha hamelech hayoshev al kisei ram v'nisa. On page 147, page 147 for Shochen Ad, the official beginning of Shachrit. Shochen Ad Marom v'kadosh shemo v'chatuv rananu tzadikim b'Adonai לישרים נאווה תהילה. בפי ישרים תתהלל ובדברי צדיקים תתברך ובלשון חסידים תתרומם ובקרב קדושים תתקדש ידדי ידדי די 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 ידדי ידדי די די ידדי די יבבי ידדי די 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 ידדי יבבי Yadadai, 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 yamdai, dai, 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 yababai, yadadai, yamdai, dai, 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 David ben Yishai, Abdecha Meshichecha. Page 148, Ishtabach. Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu Ha'el HaMelech HaGdol V'Rosh Ma'im Ba'aretz Kilechanan El V'Hei Avoteinu Shir U'Shvacha Halel V'Zimra Ozu Memshela Netzach Gedula U'Gvura Tehila V'Tiferet Kedusha u'malchut, brachot v'hodaot me'ata v'yad olam. All our praise we sing unto you. Brachot v'hodaot me'ata v'yad olam. All our praise we sing unto you. Shir u'shvacha halel v'zimra. Ozu memshala netzach Gedula u'gvura tehila v'tiferet Kedusha u'malchut Brachot v'hodaot me'ata v'yad olam. All our praise we sing unto you. Brachot v'hodaot me'ata v'yad olam. All our praise we sing unto you. Baruch Atamnai HaMelech Gadol B'Tishbachot El HaHodaot Adon HaNiflaot HaBocher B'Shirei Zimra Melech El Chei HaOlamim. Continue on page 150 as we bless over the new day. Baruch Atamnai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Yotzer Or V'Orei Choshech Osei Shalom Uvarei et HaKol HaKol Yidecha. In Kirchana Elohim Yom Hazeh V'yein Zilcha Mokin Elecha Yeholam Ba Efetz B'tcha L'gor Aleinu Mot Mashiach V'yein Dom Elecha Moshi'in Et Tchiyat HaMeitim. Page 151. El Adon Al Kol Ha'amasim Baruch Umvorach Beficho Neshama Golo V'tuvo Malei Olam Da'at Utvuna Sovavim Oto Hamitga'el Chayot HaKodesh V'nedar V'chavod Al HaMecha V'zechut U'mishor Lifnei Chiso Chesed V'rachamim Lifnei Kivodo Tovim Me'orot Shebara Eloheinu Yitzaram B'da'at B'vina Uv'haskel Koach u'gvura natan bahem liod moshlim bekerev tevel meleim ziv umfikim nogana ezivam v'chol ha'olam semechim b'tzetam v'sasim b'voam osim b'hem ha'retzon konaham pa'er v'chavod notnim nishmo zola v'rina lezecher machuto Kara l'shemesh v'yizrach ora v'hitkin surat havana shevach notnim lo kol tzeva marom tiferet Keto Gedula Serafim Ve'yofanim Ve'chayot HaKodesh Yam Dai Dai Dam Dai Yai Da Dan Dan Dai Yam Dai Di Da Dai Yai Da Dan Dan Dai Yam Dai Di Da Dai Yai Da Dan Dan Dai Dai Yam Dai Di Da Dai Yam Da 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 Dai 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 Yai Nai 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 Nai. Continue on page 152. Le'el asher Shabbat mikol masim bayom hashvi'i ta'ala. Page 153 at the first arrow. Kulam haovim, kulam virurim, kulam giborim, kulam osim be'ema b'raretzon konam, v'kulam pochtem epihem bituk shabbat tohora, v'shira v'zimra, umfarchim v'shavchim farim umaritzim, umachdishim umamlechim, et shem ha'el ha'melech, hagadol hagibor, hanora kadoshu, v'kulam mekalim alehem, O malchut shamayim ze mizeh, v'notnim reshut ze lazeh, להקדיש לסם בנחת רוח, בשפה ברורה ונעימה, קדושה כולם כאחד עונים ויורים בעירה. קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך על הארץ כבודו. ואופנים וחיות הקודש, ברעש גדול מן הסים לעומת צרפים, ולמטה משבחים ויאמרים, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו, לאל ברוך מתנו. ורק גבורת השכל הטוב, מה מלכם בתורך תגמת לך, לשמוע ברפו, ונראתי לו את אדוני פלאות המחדש. אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו, ברוך אתה אדוני, יוצר המאורות. Page 154, אהבה רבה. אהבה רבה אהבתנו, אדוני אלוהינו, חמלה גדולה ויתרה, חמלת עלינו. אבינו מלכנו, בעבור אבותינו, שבטחו בך, אבינו מלכנו. ותלמדם חוקי חיים, כן תכוננו תלמדנו, אבינו האב הרחמן, המרחם רחם עלינו. ותן בליבנו להבין ולהשכיל לשמוע, ללמוד וללמד, לשמור ולעשות, ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. והאר עינינו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחד לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בטחנו, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך. We gather the four corners of our talitot, our tzitzit, as we prepare to say Shema together. והביאנו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו קוממיות קוממי עוד לארצנו, כי אל פועל ישועות אתה, ובנו בחרת מכל עם ולשון, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול סלע, באמת להודות לך, וליחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוחר במה ישראל באהבה. Shema is on page 155. El Melech Ne'eman. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. ויהי שמות תשמעו אל מצוותי, אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם היום, לאהבה את אדוני אלוהיכם ולעבדו בכל לבבכם ובכל נפשכם, ונתתי מטר ארצכם בעתו יורה ומלקוש, ואספת דגניך ותירושך ויצריך, נתתי עשב בשדיך לבהמתך, ואכלת ושבעת, השתמרו לכם פן יפתה לבבכם, וזרתם וראיתם אלוהים אחרים, והשתחוויתם להם, וראה פני בכם, ועצר את השמיים ולא יהיה מטר, והאדמה לא תיתן את יבולה, ורבתם מהרה מעל הארץ הטובה אשר אדוני נותן לכם, ושמתם את דברי אלה על לבבכם ועל נפשכם, וקשרתם אותם לאות על ידכם, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניכם, למדתם אותם את בניהם לדבר בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך, למען ירבו ימיכם וימי בניכם על האדמה אשר נשבע אדוני לאבותיכם לתת להם, כימי השמיים על הארץ. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם, ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בניהם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית הכנף וצל תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית, וראיתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני, ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Page 157. לדור ודור הוא קיים ושמו קיים, כי שא נכון מלכותו ואמרתו ליד קיימת, ורב חיים וקיימים. Kiss and release our ציצית. אמת שאתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, מלכנו מלך אבותינו, גואלנו גואל אבותינו, יוצר נצור שורתנו, פותנו מצילנו מלמד שמך, אין אלוהים זולתך, עזרת אבותינו אתה הוא מעולם, מגיעים לשלך. Page 158, the first arrow. Tehilo le'elyon baruch hu umvorach, Moshe uvnei Yisrael lecha anu shira, v'simcha rabba ve'amru chulam, mi chamocha Ba'elim Adonai mi kamocha Nedar b'kodesh Nora tehilot sefele Shira chadasha shibchu geulim Leshimcha al sefat hayam Yachad kulam hoduvim lichu ve'amru Adonai yimoch Le'olam ba'ed Yam dai di dai di dai dai Yam di dai 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 Tzur Yisrael kuma be'ezrat Yisrael Uvtechunu mecha Yuda ve'Yisrael Go aleinu Adonai tzavaot shemo kedosh Yisrael Baruch atah Adonai Gal Israel. The Amidah begins on page 159. We'll recite it together. Just skipping over the Kedusha as we've been doing. So we'll recite it all together. Please rise. Adonai, Adonai, Sefatai Tiftach, Ufi Yagi Tehilatecha. Baruch Ata Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avoteinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor, Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chastei Avos, U'mevir Go'el, Livnei B'neihem, L'ma'an Shemo B'yahava, Melech Ozer, Moshiach U'magen, Baruch Ata Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ata Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayim Eitim Ata Rav Hoshia, Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechayim Eitim Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim V'rofeh Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar, Micha Mocha Ba'al Gevurot, Umido Melach, Melech Memit Umechaye, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'neman Ata Lechayot Metim, Baruch Ata Adonai, Mechaye HaMetim. Page 162. Ata Kadosh V'Shimcha Kadosh U'Kedoshim B'chol Yom Yehalelucha Selah Baruch Ata Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh. Yismach Yismach Moshe V'matnat Chelko Ki Even Ne'eman Ki Even Ne'eman Ki Even Ne'eman Karata Lo Ki Even Ne'eman Ki Even Ne'eman Ki Even Ne'eman Karata Lo Kelil Keli Tiferet Tiferet Rosho Natata V'omdo Lefanecha Al Har Sinai Yismach Yismach Moshe V'matnat Chelko Ki Even Ne'eman Ki Even Ne'eman Ki Even Ne'eman Karata Lo Ki Even Ne'eman Ki Even Ne'eman Ki Even Ne'eman Karata Lo U'shnei luchot avanim horid biyado V'chatuv bahem Shmirat Shabbat Shmirat Shabbat Yismach Yismach Moshe V'matnat Chelko Ki Even Ne'eman Ki Even Ne'eman Ki Even Ne'eman Karata Lo Ki Even Ne'eman Ki Even Ne'eman Ki Even Ne'eman Karata Lo V'chein katuv b'Toratecha V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat L'dorotam v'rit olam B'ni uvein b'nei Yisrael Oti le'olam B'ni uvein b'nei Yisrael Oti le'olam
כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש. ולא נתת אדוני אלוהינו גוי ארצות, ולא הכנת בקנים לבגדי פסלים, וגם מלאכתו לשכני ערלים. כי לישראל עמך נתת באהבה, לזרע ויעקב אשר בם בחרת. העם מקדשי שבי, כולם ישמעו ותלמדו בטובך, והשביעי ראית בו וקידשתו, חמדת ימין אותו קראת, זכר למעשה וראשית. אלוהינו, אלוהי אבותינו, רצה במנוחתנו, קדשנו במצוותיך, ותן חלקנו בתורתך, סבנו מטובך, ושמחנו בישועתך, וטהר ליבנו לעבדך באמת, והנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה וברצון שבת קודשך, ואנוכו בישראל מקדשי שמך. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. רצה אדוני אלוהינו ביומך ישראל תפילתם, והשבת עבודה לבית ביתך אישי ישראל תפילתם, באהבה תגברה ורצון ותהי רצון תלמידי עבודת ישראל עמך, ותחזינה עינינו בשובך לציון ברחמים. ברוך אתה אדוני המחזיר שכנתו לציון. מודים אנחנו לך שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ולא יהיותנו לעולם ועד. צורכנו מגן ישרתנו אתה לדור ודור. נודה לך נספר תהילתך, החיים המסורים בידיך, ביד נשמתנו הבדלך, ביד ניסך שכל יום עמנו, ביד נפלתך וטובתך שכל עת, ערב ובוקר וצהריים. הטוב כי לא רחמך, המרחם כי לא תנוח חסדך מעולם קיווינו לך, ועל כולם יברך בשלומם שמך מלכנו תמיד לעולם ועד. בכל החיים מדוך עד סלע, ועלו את שמך באמת, האל ישותנו ועזרתנו סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, הטוב שמך ולך נאה להודות. שים שלום, שים שלום טובה וברכה בעולם. שים שלום טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל עמך. ברכנו אבינו כולנו כאחד באור פניך. שים שלום טובה וברכה בעולם. שים שלום טובה וברכה, כי באור פניך נתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו תורת חיים ואהבת חסד וצדקה וברכה ורחמים וחיים ושלום. שים שלום טובה וברכה בעולם. שים שלום טובה וברכה, וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל, בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שים שלום טובה וברכה בעולם. שים שלום טובה וברכה. ברוך אתה אדוני מברך לעמו ישראל בשלום. אלוהי נצור ישלם מרע, וסתר מדבר מרמה, וכלכלה נפשי תדום, ונפשי כעפר לכל תהיה. פתח ליבי בתורתך וניצתך תרדוף נפשי, וכל חשים הרע לרעה, מהרה הפרצתם כלכה מחשבתם. עשה למען שמך, עשיתי למענך, עשה למען קודשך, עשה למען תורתך, למען יחרצו לידיך, הושע ימינך יענני. ויראו לצון אמרי פי והגיון ליבי לפניך, אדוני צורי וגואלי. עושה שלום ברמיו, Hu yaseh shalom alenu v'kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Ose shalom bimromav. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Ve'akol Yisrael. Ve'imru. Ve'imru. Amen. Ose shalom bimromav. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, ve'imru, amen. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Shabbat shalom, everybody. So for those of you who came in the last 40 minutes or so since we started. Apologize for I'm not on the bima, obviously. I'm up in Mammoth, and last night I was over out in nature where it's beautiful, but not such a great signal. So this morning I'm in a friend's condo where there's good Wi-Fi connection, and I haven't been able to actually shower in the last few days, which is why I've got the hat on. So I apologize for things being mixed up a bit today, but we still get to enjoy Shabbat together. The Shabbat, besides the fact that it's 4th of July, which makes it pretty special in and of itself, it's also Shabbat Chukat Balak. It's a double Torah portion. The Torah reading, we have it listed on the website. There's a link there to be able to grab the Torah reading. If you are following along in a Chumash at home, we are in the book of Numbers, chapter 19, verse 1. So, Book of Numbers, chapter 19. And so we're reading the first bit of the Parsha, since we're in the first year of the triennial. We're reading from Chukat. Chukat begins with the death of Miriam, and then we have the sin of Moses and Aaron, or at least of Moses, striking the rock. And then in Balak, we have the great Torah portion where there are no Jews at all in Balak. It is a story entirely about non-Jews and trying to curse us to no avail. The one bit that we kind of see ourselves here in the Parsha is towards the end, when Bilam goes to curse us. In the final curse, he sees the tents that the Israelites set up in such a way that everybody has complete privacy. And so he says, Ma tovu olecha Yaakov, how good are your tents, Mishkonotecha Yisrael. How good are your tents, Jacob? Your dwelling place is Israel. And I have to say, being camping right now up in Mammoth, I know what it's like to not have privacy. To want to get changed in the morning and have to make sure nobody can actually see me and actually want to have that privacy. It's pretty difficult. So that's the one place that we appear. And of course we sing Matovu in the morning before we begin our davening traditionally. So it's actually a lot of Torah readings. There's a lot of text here today. So I'm going to try to get through it relatively quickly as possible. It's a 10-page printout from Trope Trainer, which is pretty long. It's about twice as long as they usually are. So, all right. By the way, we didn't have anybody sign up to read Torah today. But going forward, in future weeks, if anybody wants to lead a part of the service, if you want to sing some of the Psalms from Psuki to Zemra, or if you want to lead us in Shachrit Amidah, or if you want to read Torah, any of those things, please just send me an email. And maybe Jeff, we'll work something out with the Tephilo committee and maybe try to do some coordinating just to reach out to some folks to get it. We'll see. We'll have that conversation. But either way, we are in Book of Numbers, chapter 19, verse 1, the first Aliyah. וידבר אדוני אל משה ואל אהרון לאמור, זאת חוקת התורה אשר ציווה אדוני לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל, יקחו אליך פרה אדומה תמימה, אשר אין בה מום, אשר לא עלה עליה אור, ונתתם אותה אל אלעזר הכהן, והוציא אותה אל מחוץ למחנה, ושחט אותה לפניו, לקח אלעזר הכהן מדמה באצבעו, והיזה אל נוכח פני אוהל מועד מדמה 7 פעמים, ושרף את הפרה לעיניו, את אורה ואת בשרה ואת דמה, על פרשה ישרוף, ולקח הכהן עץ ארז וזוב ושני תולעת, והשליח אל תוך שרפת הפרה, וכיבס בגדיו הכהן, ורחץ בשרו במים, ואחר יבוא אל מחנה, וטמא הכהן עד הערב, והשורף אותה יכבס בגדיו במים, ורחץ בשרו במים, וטמא עד הערב. ואסף איש טהור את אפר הפרה, והניח מחוץ למחנה במקום טהור, והייתה לדת בני ישראל למשמרת למי נידחת היא. So we begin with the story of the red heifer. And here with the red heifer, it has to be, so it's red, heifer, meaning it's female, cannot be a bull. It says it cannot have a single blemish on it, and it can never have had a yoke placed on its neck. So it's got to be, I'm thinking like a, what's the really high, a Kobe. I'm thinking like a Kobe beef, like really well pampered, except this one is entirely red. And the rabbis actually say when they're looking at it, if they find any hairs at all on the heifer that are dark brown or white or anything, that would actually invalidate it. So it makes it extremely difficult to be able to find this red heifer. So they burn the entirety of the heifer, with the exception of a little bit of the blood, which Eleazar would sprinkle onto the tent, the opening of the tent of the meeting, and then they burn everything else upon the excrement of the heifer. So everything is fully contained from within this heifer. The people who slaughter it have to go through a purification process, and the person who gathers the ashes and takes them outside of camp also has to go through a purification process, which is ironic because the whole point of the ashes here are to purify. But in order to create something which purifies, it makes you impure. All right, we're looking at the second aliyah, verse 10. So second aliyah is verse 10. V'kibeis ha'osef et efar hapara et begadav v'tameh ad ha'arev v'ayta livnei Yisrael v'lager hagar b'tocham lechukat olam hanogea bamet lechol nefesh אדם וטמא 7 ימים הוא יתחטא בו ביום השלישי וביום השביעי יטהר ואם לא יתחטא ביום השלישי וביום השביעי לא יטהר כל הנוגע במת בנפש האדם אשר ימות ולא יחטא את משכן אדוני טימא ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מישראל כי מנידה לא זורק עליו טמא אדוני עוד טומאתו בו זאת התורה אדם כי ימות באוהל כי הבא אל האוהל וכל אשר באוהל יטמא 7 ימים וכל כלי פתוח אשר אין צמיד פתיל עליו טמא הוא וכל אשר ייגע על פני השדה וחלך חרב או במת או בעצם אדם או בקבר kaver yitma shivat yamim v'lakchu letameh me'afar srefat chatat v'natan alav mayim chayim el kali. So we have now this idea that anybody who comes in contact with a corpse is going to be ritually impure for 7 days. And this is regarding if you are within a dwelling place. If you are in the same tent as that corpse, then you are going to be ritually impure for 7 days. And anything that's within that house is going to be impure. Any vessels which were open and didn't have, here what says, a tzmid patil. A tzmid patil is going to be like a little string that you would use. Like you close it up, you have a string over it, a little wax seal, that is to symbolize that it's a fully sealed container, hasn't been opened. Usually you would do that for like wine that has been, that's to show that the wine was supervised and hasn't been touched by anybody else, God forbid, for idolatrous purposes, right? You have to have that little seal to be able to show that it in fact is fully closed. Anything that doesn't have that seal is also going to be ritually impure. And it does not look like those things can ever be made. Those things can't be made impure. The vessel itself can be made, but the items within it cannot. So there we go. We're continuing with, by the way, I can't see everybody because of the setup that I have. If anybody has a question or any comments at any point in this in between, feel free to unmute yourself, interrupt me, just ask, obviously, hopefully, politely interrupt me. But obviously, please don't do that while I'm in the middle of reading. I can't, Carol, I can only see you because you happen to be on the first page, so the first screen. So I can call on you. But anybody else, please just unmute yourself and speak up if you want to say something.
I was when you were talking about the 7 days where the people have to be outside because they're impure. Does that have anything to do with the 7 days of Shiva and isolating yourself from the world?
I'm sure they are connected. We see elsewhere in the Torah of people sitting for 7 days of mourning, and also 30 days is a number that we see. But right, you can't necessarily go about doing other things that would require you to be ritually pure if you came in contact with the deceased. However, you still would sit Shiva for 7 days. Let's say you're grown, you've moved out of the home. You hear that your father has passed away. You don't ever actually come in contact with the body, right? But you would still then be obligated to sit Shiva for the 7 days anyways. However, here it also says, but what happens if the body that you come across is not in the house, in a tent, right? What if it is, you come across a corpse just laying there in the middle of a field? Or if you've even come across the kaver, or it said kaver because it was on an etnachta. Kever would be the word normally. Kever is a grave. If you come across a grave, you also would then have to become ritually impure, which is why Kohanim don't go into graveyards for anybody except for their immediate family. So technically anybody who would, if you were to go to a funeral, you would be ritually impure for a week afterwards anyways, because you came into a grave. But still, even if you are nowhere even near the deceased and you're nowhere near the graveyard, you would still sit Shiva for 7 days. So they can be connected, but they're not necessarily one and the same. Yeah. Any other comments, questions before we continue? All right. We're going to continue with the third Aliyah. We are verse 18. Third Aliyah, verse 18. ולקח איזו וטבל במים אשר טהור ויזה על האוהל ועל כל הכלים ועל הנפשות אשר היו שם ועל הנוגע בעצם או בחלל או במת או בקבר והיזה הטהור על הטמא ביום השלישי וביום השביעי וחיטאו ביום השביעי וכיבס בגדיו ורחץ במים וטהר בערב ואיש אשר יטמא ולא יתחטא ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מתוך הקהל, כי את מקדש אדוני טימא, מנידה לא זורק עליו טמא הוא, והייתה להם לחוקת עולם, ומה זה? מהנידה יכבס בגדיו, הנוגע בימי הנידה יטמע עד הערב, וכל אשר ייגע בו הטמא יטמע, והנפש הנוגעת תטמע עד הערב. ויבוא בני ישראל העדה מדבר צין בחודש הראשון, וישב העם בקדש, ותעמוד שם מרים ותיקבר שם, ולא היה מים לעדה, ויקהלו על משה ועל אהרון, וירב העם עם משה, ויאמרו לאמור ולא גבענו, נגבע אחינו לפני אדוני, ולמה הבאתם את קהל אדוני אל המדבר הזה למות שם אנחנו ובערינו, ולמה העליתונו ממצרים להביא אותנו אל המקום הרע הזה, לא מקום זה רע, ותאנה וגפן ורימון ומים אין לשתות. ויבוא משה ואהרון מפני הקהל אל פתח אוהל מועד, ויפלו על פניהם, וירא כבוד אדוני עליהם. All right, so we have two different things happening here, and a little shift. I apologize, Rose and Lev just came in, and I was a little distracted hearing the sounds. I don't know if it got picked up by the microphone. So I apologize if I was a little scatterbrained as reading. So we have the people having to be purified. Somebody who is pure has to come and sprinkle this purification water on the person who is ritually impure. So you have to do this both on the third and on the seventh day. Seventh day, the person then washes, and that evening, at the end of the seventh day, they are then considered pure again. However, anybody who doesn't go through this process, anybody who just kind of continues about their life as if they were not actually ritually impure, that soul will be cut off from the people, assuming there that the person is going to then come in contact with something holy or come into the mikdash, to the Mishkan to bring sacrifices, thereby making God's space ritually impure. So that would obviously be a problematic thing. That's why the punishment is to then be cut off. And then we have all of a sudden a complete shift of focus as we get to chapter 20.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah, please.
It's funny, the person that sprinkles the water is like a nurse or a doctor in COVID. And then that sprinkling person who is like a nurse or a doctor has to wash his clothes, which is what all those people do when they get home, apparently.
Or they wear, full garb and they have to take everything, be fully covered, right?
They still come home and wash their clothes, I understand, and they leave their shoes at the door.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, obviously, there are a lot of ways to be able to find some connections here, but yeah. So now we have this complete shift to the death of Miriam, which makes us wonder, is this to prepare us for the death of Miriam, that we're learning about, what happens when you come across a body, somebody that's dead, or is there something about the person who was ritually impure and then doesn't then go through this process, that soul is then cut off? And now all of a sudden we read about Miriam? It seems very strange. Like, why do we just jump to this story of the death of Miriam? Rabbis don't necessarily make that connection, but that should raise some questions for us. But here we have the, hold on, excuse me, one moment, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. All right. So we have the death of Miriam. of course, she dies. Miriam was responsible for the water for all the people. Right? That was her job. Wherever they went, she would draw the water for the people. Of course, she dies. So now there's no water, and the people get very upset, and they start. It says, "Vayarev ha'am im Moshe." The people quarrel with Moses, and they're like, "Why are you doing this to us? Why did you bring us here into this wilderness to die? Things were better where we were." Right? We hear the same fetch over and over again, and we have no water to drink. Right, so Moses and Aaron, they're just kind of besides themselves. They fall down their faces. Woe unto us! What are we going to do? And then God appears and has a solution, and that's where we are with the fourth aliyah. Fourth aliyah. This is chapter 20, verse 7. Chapter 20, verse 7. Fourth aliyah. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, kach et hamate, v'kakhel et ha'ida, ata v'Aaron achicha, v'dibartem el hasela, v'nehem v'natan meimav, v'hoseta lehem mayim min hasela, v'hishkita et ha'ida v'et v'iram, v'kach Moshe et hamate milifnei Adonai, את המטה מלפני אדוני, כאשר ציווהו, ויקהילו משה ואהרון את הקהל על פני הסלה, ויאמרו להם, שמונה המורים מן הסלע הזה, נוציא לכם מים, וירם משה את ידו, ויח את הסלע במטהו פעמיים, ויצאו מים רבים בתשת העדה ובעירם, ויאמר אדוני אל משה ואל אהרון, יען לא האמנתם בי להקדישני לעיני בני ישראל, לכן לא תביאו את הקהל הזה אל הארץ אשר נתתי להם, המה מי מריבה אשר רבו בני ישראל את אדוני ויקדש בם. So, pretty famous story. This is God telling Moses, okay, the people want some water. Miriam is no longer around to be able to do this. You're going to go to this rock, and you're going to speak to the rock. You're going to command the rock to give forth its water. Moses shows up. For whatever reason, the people get under his skin. He says, listen up, you rebels. Right? And it's like he gets frustrated and he takes his staff and strikes the rock not once, but twice. And lots of water comes out and everybody gets the water that they want. But God's not happy. So God says, because you didn't believe in me and because you didn't sanctify me in the eyes in front of all the people, therefore, you and Aaron are not going to be entering into the land of Israel. You're not going to be leading these people into the land of Israel. It's actually interesting. I never really noticed it before. It says, Lo taviu et hakahal hazeh el haaretz. It says, you will not bring this community to the land. But it doesn't actually say, you will not go into the land. I actually really noticed that before until reading it just now. So we'll see different language in Deuteronomy when God reminds Moses why he's not allowed to go into the land. But here it just says you can't bring them in. You can't be their leader anymore. So, all right. Any questions? Any comments? Anybody? Going? All right.
I'd just like to always say
Oh, yeah.
just how powerful losing your temper can be. I mean, you finally, there's a revolt of Korach, there's the death of his sister, all the stuff is piling up. And the people are constantly complaining against him. Every other chapter, you brought us out here to die, things were better in Egypt. The portions are so small and the food is terrible. Everything. And I think, he finally loses it. And when you're the leader, you just can't do that. You can't just lose it like that.
It's
That's the end of your career.
true. It's tricky. It can be exhausting. All right. We're going to continue. Fifth aliyah here. We're verse 14. Chapter 20, verse 14 for the fifth aliyah. Vayishlach Moshe malachim mikadesh el melech Edom Ko amar achicha Yisrael, ata yadata et kol hatla'a asher matzatnu, vayerdu avotenu Mitzrayma, vaneshev b'Mitzrayim yamim rabim, vayareu lanu Mitzrayim lavotenu, v'nitzak el Adonai vayishma kolenu, vayishlach malach v'yotzienu mimitzrayim, v'hinei anachnu b'kadesh ir k'tzei gvulecha, navrana ba'artzecha, lo navor basadeh uvakarem v'lo nishte me ba'er derech hamelech nelech, lo nite yamim usmol ad asher navor gvulecha, vayomer elav Edom lo tavor bi pen lecherev etze likratecha, vayomru alav b'nei Yisrael b'mesila na'aleh v'imeimecha nishte ani u'miknai v'natati michram rak ein devar baraglai avora, vayomer lo tavor, vayetze Edom likrato va'am kaved uvayad hazaka, vayamein Edom neton et Yisrael avor bigvulo, vayet Yisrael me'alav. So here we have a complete shift of conversation. They want to pick up and leave Kadesh Barnea, which is where they are currently camped out, and they send word to the king of Edom saying, listen, we are in Kadesh Barnea, which is right by your boundary. We need to continue on our way. Please let us pass through. Don't worry, we're not going to walk through your vineyards. We're not going to go through your fields. We're just going to take the King's Highway, right? We just want to take the main road. And if anybody were to even pause and take anything, we will pay you for whatever they took. But please, just let us pass through. And they said, thou shalt not pass. And so they said, okay, let's just go the long way around. And that's exactly what they do. All right.
Can I ask a question? Sorry. I noticed that Moshe tells them that there was an angel that helped them get out of Egypt. And is that mentioned in way back further? Like, when they cross the Red Sea, is there an angel mentioned there?
Well, I think the idea is I'm not sure if the word malach is actually used in
Where?
the story. In the story of the Exodus, I'm not sure if the word malach is actually used there.
Uh-huh.
But we have malach hamavet. We know for a fact that malach hamavet passes through and aided them in their Exodus. So
Was that the Red Sea?
no, that was with the death of the firstborn, right? It says specifically the malach hamavet passes through Egypt and killed the firstborn that night. So we know for a fact that God did send a malach, an angel, an emissary to aid with the Exodus. I can't recall if it said that a malach guided them, it was at the front as they went, or if it was just the pillars that were there. I can't recall, but yeah. But also, he also doesn't say anything about God brought us out with these great signs and wonders, which is what we say anytime we tell the story to ourselves, because that might not be what he's trying to convince Edom. But it's interesting. It refers to Edom as like brother, right? You are a brother, because Edom was Esav, and Yisrael is Yaakov, and so they are brothers. But even though the fact that Esav and Yaakov actually parted on good terms at the end, towards the end of their narrative, still maybe there's a bit of bad blood between the two communities, 150 years later. So, but either way, they say you cannot come through our land. Go around. Sorry. All right. Looking at the sixth aliyah now. Sixth aliyah. This is verse 22. We're in chapter 20, verse 22. Sorry if I keep moving around. It's kind of uncomfortable here on this couch. It may have something to do with sleeping on the ground for the last couple nights. Vayis'u mikadesh vayavo b'nei Yisrael kol ha'eda hor hahar vayomer Adonai el Moshe ve'el Aaron b'hor hahar al gvul eretz Edom lemor Yasef Aaron el amav ki lo yavo el haaretz asher natati livnei Yisrael al asher miritem et pi lemei meribah kach et Aaron v'et Elazar beno va'alotam hor hahar v'hafshet et Aaron et bigadav v'halbashtam et Elazar beno v'Aaron yasef u'met sham v'yas Moshe kasher tziva Adonai v'yalu el hor hahar le'nei kol ha'eda v'fashet Moshe et Aaron et bigadav v'yalbesh otam et Elazar beno v'yamot Aaron sham berosh hahar v'yered Moshe v'Elazar min hahar v'yir'u kol ha'eda ki gava Aaron v'yivchu et Aaron 30 yom kol beit Yisrael v'yishma HaKanani melech Arad Yoshev HaNegev Ki Ba Yisrael Derech HaAtarim Vayilachem V'Yisrael Vayish Mimenu Shevi Vayidar Yisrael Neder Ladonai Vayomar Inaton Titen Et Ha'am Hazeh B'Yadi Haramti et Arehem Vayishama Adonai B'Kol Yisrael Vayiten et HaKanani Vayacharem et hem ve'et Arehem Vayikra Shem Hamakom Chorma Vayisu Mehor Hahar Derech Yam Suf Lisvov et Eretz Edom Vatiktsar nefesh ha'am badarech vaydaber ha'am belohim u'Moshe lama helitunu memitzrayim lamut bamidbar ki ein lechem ve'ein mayim v'nafshenu katza ba'lechem ha'klol kel Vayishlach Adonai ba'am et hanechashim hasrafim vayenashku et ha'am vayamot ad rav meYisrael rav meYisrael vayavo ha'am el Moshe vayomru chatanu ki dibarnu b'Adonai uvach hitpalel el Adonai Vayisar me'aleinu et hanachash vayitpalel Moshe ba'ad ha'am vayomer Adonai el Moshe aseh lecha saraf v'sim oto al nes v'haya kohanashuch vayar ota v'chai vayas Moshe nachash nechoshet vayisimehu al hanes Vaya im nashach hanachash et ish vehibit el nachash hanachoshet v'chai. All right, this is a long one and weird stuff going on here. So first we have God saying to Aaron, just like I just told you a few verses ago, you're not going to be able to go into the land of Israel. At least you're not going to be able to lead the people to the land of Israel. And so here, it's time for you to die. Take off your special vestments, and you're going to give them to your son Elazar. He's going to take over for you. And so that's exactly what happens. Moshe removes Aaron's vestments, puts them onto Elazar, and then Aaron goes and dies. And says the people mourn him for 30 days. So Carol, based on your question before, here we have one of the instances of the people mourning for 30 days. Excuse me, 1 second. Sorry. there. Am I there? Can you guys see me again? Am I back? Okay. Sorry, my phone was low battery, I guess. Okay, so so it says, yeah, they're gonna have to die at that point. So he's gathered, he dies, they mourn him for 30 days. Then we have word of Arad hearing about the Israelites being there, and the Israelites, and they think, oh great, let's go and battle these Israelites. And the Israelites pray out to God, please let us win. And of course, God lets them win. And if we win, we'll tear down their cities. We'll do whatever we need to do. Please just let us not be harmed. And so everything, it works out in their favor. But still, despite that, we get to chapter 21, verse 5. And this is where we have really interesting language. We have Vaydaber ha'am be'Elohim uva Moshe. So if you recall from the story of Miriam speaking against Moses when she's given Sarat, right, the language there is Vaydaber ba, right? Vaydaber Miriam v'Aaron ba Moshe. And so here you have the Vaydaber ba, and we've learned elsewhere that Vaydaber is going to be stronger language versus Vayomer, which is just kind of speaking. And the ba prefix says that you're really speaking against somebody. You're challenging somebody. And so we know what happened when Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses. Right? Miriam was struck with leprosy. And here we have the people speaking not only against Moses, but also against God, despite everything that God has done for them up to this point. And they're kvetching again about food and about water. And so God says, you know what? Enough of this. I'm going to kill some more of these people because they just can't get the idea right. They just can't get the idea. So they send these fiery snakes, and they start killing the people. And and so the people die. It says Varav Am Rav, and a lot of people died. People then realize, oh my God, we sinned. We shouldn't have done this. They begged God. They begged Moses to pray to God to end all this. And Moses says, fine, I'll speak to God. And God says, okay, here's what you're going to do. You're going to make this copper or bronze snake, and you're going to put it on the flag. The word nes is kind of like a flag, something you would fly to, like a banner to get people's attention. So you're going to use that as this kind of staff that holds up this banner. And the people are going to look at it. And anybody who looks at it won't die. And people who don't come to look at it, they will die. So there's this crazy little side note of all the people then decide to line up and come look at this copper snake so that they wouldn't die. And it says they lived. Vachai, they lived. Very strange. Any questions, comments on this bizarre stuff before we go to the final aliyah here? No? Okay. So we're the seventh aliyah, the final aliyah. We are chapter 21, verse 10. Verse 10. Vayis'u b'nei Yisrael vayachanu ba'ovot vayis'u ma'ovot vayis'u ma'ovot me'ovot vayachanu be'iyei ha'avarim b'midbar asher al pnei Moav mizrach hashamesh Misham nasa'u v'echanu b'nachal zared Misham nasa'u v'echanu me'ever Arnon asher b'midbar hayotze migvul ha'emori ki Arnon gvul Moav ben Moav uvein ha'emori al ken ye'amar b'sefer milchamot Adonai et vahev et vahev v'sufa v'et hanachalim Arnon v'asher hanachalim asher nata l'shavet Ar v'nish'an ligvul Moav u'misham be'era hi ha'be'er asher amar Adonai l'Moshe esof et ha'am ve'na lahem mayim az Yashir Yisrael et hashira hazot eli be'er anula be'er hapra sarim karua nedivei ha'am b'mechokek b'mishanotam umimidbar matana u'imatana nachalial u'minachalial bamod Uvamot Hagai Asher Bisdei Moav Rosh Hapiska Vanishkafa Alpane Hayeshimon. And so here we just have the final little bit here, really the beginnings of the travels. People just moving from place to place to place, and in one of these places, God happened to give them a bunch of water, and they start singing God's praises again. Just a very strange, small little footnote. All the other kvetching that we hear so much about, and here, God gives them some water, and it says Az Yashir, which sounds a lot like Shirat Hayam, this idea of salvation, which should make us think about this. There's this great salvation going on here, and it's just completely overlooked by Torah. Just a little aside for us. Any questions on any of the stuff here? There's a lot here.
I got a question. Is there any relationship between Nachash and Nechoshet? They're both with a chet.
I would imagine there's probably just, if anything else, it's probably just more poetic that it helps us remember, right? That we see things like that happen like that a lot. You actually see that happen a lot in Mishnah. We use really simple language that is almost playful or poetic that makes it a lot easier to remember. And the reason why some of the first written texts were actually poems is because it's a lot easier for people to remember stories when it's written as a poem. So if we're telling a story, we shall say it's a Nachash Nechoshet, because it'll be a lot easier for people to remember, the Nachash Nechoshet, that there's something poetic about those words. Okay. Any other questions, thoughts, comments?
I have a question going back to earlier where we're talking about how someone's contaminated by touching a corpse or being in any contact with a corpse. How does this work for contemporary Jewish mortuaries, for the people who work in them?
Well, it's great because we no longer have a Beit HaMikdash. We no longer have a temple. We no longer offer sacrifices. So ritual purity really doesn't make a difference. Of course, in a more orthoprax world, a lot of people still say, but women still get ritually impure every month, so they have to go to the mikveh and become ritually pure. But they don't necessarily say the same thing anytime people, like men, come in contact with blood or a dead animal or have any mission or anything else. So it really, today, modern context, it doesn't really make a difference. Even still with Kohanim, it really shouldn't make a difference because there's no Beit HaMikdash. They're not offering sacrifices. So there really shouldn't be an issue with Kohanim going into a cemetery or a mortuary or anything. But we maintain these practices because at some point, many people wish for there to be a third Beit HaMikdash, and we'll want to make sure that all the Kohanim are actually ritually pure at that time. So, whoever needs to step up. So that's the concern. Yeah, but also still, this idea that if you are ritually impure and you don't go through this process, then your soul will be cut off, and so it doesn't necessarily stipulate there that it has to be in a time that a temple is standing, and so people might take this very seriously, which would be another reason why Kohanim wouldn't do this. But I've been in plenty of mortuaries, I've been in plenty of graveyards, I've never gone to a mikveh afterwards, and I don't really know of any colleagues who do. The one thing I will say though is that at most cemeteries, Jewish cemeteries, near the exit, or at least near where you would get back into your car, there are often little spigots or water fountains where you can wash your hands. And anytime you go to a house of shiva, following a funeral, it's customary to have a little, a pitcher of water out front so people can wash their hands as well, to kind of It's like a kal. It's like a maaseh kal, like a simple act, kind of a watered, pardon the pun, unintended, a watered down version of the actual act of going through this immersion. We're just going to kind of wash the ritual impurity off of our bodies, off of our hands before we come into a home, especially before we eat. So, yeah.
The other thing about the snake on a stick. Do we know if we have any connection? You know, in medicine, we have the caduceus, which is the symbol of medicine, is another snake on a stick
With wings.
with wings. I'm wondering if we know if there's a connection.
I would have no clue. But I nominate you to look on Wikipedia over the over the coming week, and you can give us an answer next Shabbat.
It's hard to think that that's just a coincidence.
I really have no idea. And even if it's, I imagine this is probably connected to something else. I imagine something probably in ancient world, or just in other, traditions. There probably is some sort of symbolism that would have be connected to, but I really have no clue about it. It's one of those more obscure things. So. All right. While we are still in this this process of kind of in Torah discussion, if you will, I want to make sure that we have time for Mishaberach. So again, I can't see everybody, so I'm going to say the beginning of Mishaberach. When I pause, I'll just ask you to unmute yourself, and you can share the name of somebody who's in need of a Mishaberach. Mishaberach Avatanu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov v'imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel Leah hu yivarech v'yarpei et hacholim. Anybody?
My wife now Gosha.
Yehudit Bar Esther.
Amy Davis and Lois Rick and my aunts Hope and Flora.
Elka Bela Bat Hadassah, Hannah Bat Aliza, Avram Bat Ben Aliza, Hannah Rivka Bat Tova Leah, Eli Melech Ben Sarah, Candace Shikai, and Larry Lynch.
My father, Fred Martin, and our members, Jill and Bruce Colbert.
Gene Alpha.
Malka Bat Sarah.
Anybody else? Chana Rivka Bat Esther. V'chol cholei ha'magifa. HaKadosh Baruch Hu yimalei rachamim aleihem. L'achzikam v'otam lishlach lehem mehera ufra shlema min hashemayim. Ufra shanefesh ufra taguf b'toch shar cholim. V'chazek et yadei ha'iskim b'tzorchechem. Shabbat himles oku ufra krova lavo. Hashab elav izman kariv v'nomar. Amen. Ufra shlema. A full and speedy recovery to all those who are ill, and of course, strengthening of the hands of those who are caring for them. So again, while we're still here in this space of Torah, just some short words of Torah, based on this week's parsha. So last night or yesterday, I had something very exciting happen. It was the first time in my life I had the privilege of seeing a bear in person, not at a zoo. And about 50 feet away from our tent, there was a brown bear that had gotten a hold of our neighbor's eggs and was just sitting there munching away on some eggs. It was kind of scary, but at least we were kept at a good distance, so it didn't really bother me all that much. But then later that yesterday afternoon, as we were getting ready to do our dinner before the sun went down, Rose was standing off, getting up, filling up our water jugs, and there was the brown bear again, and came right into the middle of other people's camps, right in the middle of the campsite, and so it actually set off a car alarm. It was going and going and going, and then people were yelling and banging pots and pans, trying to make a loud noise to scare the bear so it would go off. I guess somebody actually threw something at the bear to get it to kind of go away, and eventually it did go away. But even if its physical presence was gone, the threat of its return remained and left a lot of people in the area quite terrified. in particular, our daughter. Lev was very terrified last night, and we were, all three of us, once it was dark out, we all headed back into our tent to go to sleep, and she was really quite scared. And we had a choice in that moment. We just kind of tell her, don't worry about it, just ignore it, or we could kind of calm her and soothe her and let her know everything will be okay, that we're here to protect her. So of course we chose the latter, right, to calm her down, and she went to sleep like that, right? Within 30 seconds she was out. It was a long day. She was exhausted. But there have been many times in the past where she's had similar fears and was worried about certain things, and we, specifically myself, didn't have the time, the energy, the patience to try to kind of calm her down, and I just would snap at her and yell at her. And oftentimes this will happen after she should already be in bed, and she's comes out of the bedroom, one time fine, 2 times we're annoyed, 3 times we're really annoyed. By the 10th time, 12th time, we're really upset. At that point, I would lose my cool and I'll yell at her. Sometimes it'll happen in the middle of the night, and she comes into her room and she just starts making noise and refuses to go back to sleep, and I'm just exhausted and I don't want to deal with it, and I'll yell at her, and I really lose my cool. And of course, it's the stupidest decision to make, because it just makes her that much more upset. She's already scared. She's already terrified and worried about what might be. And now here the person that she turns to for some comfort and a surety yells at her and makes her feel even more scared and more afraid. And that's exactly what we see happening in this week's Parsha. Miriam is dead. The people have been through so much already, as Jeff pointed out. There have been so many trials of the people, and they lose so many of those trials, right? They just keep getting more and more terrified. And here, now all of a sudden, there's no water. And I have to say, being up here and driving through the desert and being up here in the mountains, I'm dehydrated. I've got a headache. It's easy to get cranky. And here the people have nothing to drink. They're in the middle of the desert. And on top of that, they're still terrified about everything else. They still also have that slave mentality, right? Because they were brought out of Egypt as slaves. They don't know any better. So what do? They turn to their leader, and they try to have their leader calm them down. But he doesn't calm them down. He calls them rebels. He yells at them, and he loses his cool by taking his staff and smacking a rock. Not even once, but twice. In this day and age, if a leader of an organization were to lose their cool because of whatever other frustrations they have in their life and strike out and hit something, God forbid they hit someone, but hit something, that leader probably would not still have their job, right? And so that's what we're seeing with Moshe. But it goes even further than that, because he fails not only the Israelites by making them more afraid, but he fails God by preventing God from becoming this true, calming and reassuring spiritual presence for the Israelites. So Moses, we know, is human. He's going to die at some point, and we know he's going to die at the very end of the Torah. Right? It's coming up soon. Miriam just died. Aaron dies soon after this incident. Right? So we know he's going to die as well. So what's going to happen to the people? Who are they going to have to be able to turn to find that assurity? They would only have God to find that comfort. So what is it that Moses does that's so terrible to not only terrify the people, but be able to steal away from them that sense that the miraculous can happen and be able to find some comfort and reassurance in that? So I'm out here camping. I'm up in Mammoth. Anybody who's spent time in nature around California, you know that we have very different geological, areas in this state. Rose really loves the desert, so we spend a lot of time in Joshua Tree. I really love the mountains, so I love being up in Big Sur and Mammoth and Redwoods. And so if you spend time in Joshua Tree, you know those are huge jumbo rocks, hence the place is called Jumbo Rocks. And you have these huge boulders, solid, and everything is just dry there. There's no sign at all of of life, or very little sign of life down there. But up here, right, the rocks are smaller. You don't have the same kind of large boulders all over the place. You have a lot of smaller rocks, and there's a lot of lush greenery around, and you have little waterfalls, and there's little creeks, and there are lakes. Like we know that there's water here. So why do I mention this? There are two places in the Torah where God instructs Moses to get water for the Israelites. The first place is in Parshat Bishalach, which is right after we leave Egypt. It's actually the very end of the story of the plagues, and we're finally leaving Egypt. So there God tells Moses to strike the rock. But the word for rock there is tsur. Tzadi vav resh, tsur. And here, God tells Moses, right, in our week's parsha, God tells Moses to speak to the rock, or to command the rock. And here the word rock, the word for rock is sela, samech lamed ayin, sela. So, two different types of rocks. What does that actually mean? According to Malbim, the commentary on the parsha, Malbim points out that tsur and sela are two very different types of rocks. Tsur, he says, is a solid rock in a place where there's no water in the area, and if one were to hit that rock and water would come gushing forth, that would be miraculous, because nobody would ever expect to see that ever in their life. Water coming out of a giant dry boulder. And he says sela is going to be a smaller rock, and usually what happens is it'll be in an area where there's going to be water close to the water table is close to the surface, and oftentimes it could be just a simple little stone is blocking the mouth of a spring, and you remove that stone and water will come trickling out. And so if one were to strike that rock and knock it out of the way and water comes out, it's not going to be that impressive, because people are like, yeah, of course, there's water in this area. It's not surprising. You didn't do anything terribly miraculous. But if you were to speak to that rock and all of a sudden water would come forth, that would be pretty cool. That would be miraculous. So I did a little bit of research this week. I wanted to know, so where did these two places... Sorry, one moment. There we go. Sorry about that. So I want to see where did these two events take place? The one in Bishalach and the one in this week's parsha in Chukat. So in Bishalach, God tells Moses to strike the rock in an area called Refidim. And according to researchers over the last several centuries, it's pretty much generally understood that Refidim is going to be in the southern point of the Sinai, in an area that geologically is actually very similar to Joshua Tree. There are volcanoes there. It's actually an area. I think it's Al-Bad is the area in like Saudi Arabia. But there are volcanoes. There are large boulders, and it's granite. So it's dry. There's no vegetation there. It would be incredibly surprising for there to be water coming out there. But interestingly enough, there is one giant boulder in Al-Bad that is like split down the middle, and there's sign of water erosion. And so one of the explanations could be that maybe this story from Bishalach is an etiology explaining why there's this rock that is split and showing water erosion in the middle of a place where you would never expect there to be water. And so it's because Moses hitting the rock and water coming forth. But then where does Chukat take place? It takes place in Kadesh Barnea. In Kadesh Barnea, there are other researchers that say that it's pretty much sure that also is somewhere in Saudi Arabia, kind of close to Jordan, but in an area, I can't remember the name of the place right now off the top of my head. I apologize. But it said it's the largest oasis in the area, and there's actually a fresh spring that runs through, and there's a creek that feeds through the area, and there's all these trees, and it's just this little oasis in the middle of otherwise would be deserts and canyons and nothing terribly lush and verdant. And so you imagine being in a place like that. If Moses were to strike the ground, again, it wouldn't be that impressive. And so what Moses does in this case is this idea of lo hemantem bi, you didn't have faith in me. You didn't have faith in, like you, Moses and Aaron, didn't have faith in me, God, that I told you what to do. And if you only trusted what I told you to do, then maybe that would have been enough to shut up the people, right? And maybe you would have known that I would not let anything bad happen, right? That you yourselves lost faith. But then God goes on and says, "Velo kedshani, velo yakdisheni le'nei bnei Israel," and you did not sanctify me in the eyes of the Israelites. And what God means by that is, here was an opportunity to make God look special. And Moses, you're not going to be around much longer, but here was this opportunity to do something really miraculous. Just speak to a rock, water will come out, and even when you're gone, they will know, have faith, and God will be there to be able to calm you when you are feeling stressed out. And of course, Moses failed. It's understandable that he failed. He'd been living a very long life. He had been dealing with a lot of tsuris for a long time up to this point, and he lost his cool. Was that enough to punish him forever? Not necessarily. But was it enough to say, you're not necessarily the right person to lead these people going forward? Yeah. Right? Because once you've lost the faith of the people, and they no longer trust you to be able to care for them and reassure them and give them some hope when they are most scared, then you're probably not the right person to be leading them. And I can tell you, if I were to yell at Lev all the time and to never take time to calm her and reassure her and let her know that things are all right and help her talk through her concerns and worries, I would be not as good of a dad. And I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who have had, mature figures in your life who didn't assuage your concerns and only made you more worried. And it's really difficult to look at that person with the same eyes that you might look to somebody else. And so what Moses did, was it truly terrible? Not truly terrible. But did it preclude him from continuing on his journey? Yeah. So we should all try to have that patience and to not lose our cool as much as we can. Just pausing and taking a breath and just taking a beat is always a good thing to do. And if you need to remove yourself, like I had to remove myself from Venice to not be triggered from all the fireworks on the 4th of July, right? We need to do whatever it is that we need to do to remain the best versions of ourselves. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. We're going to turn back in our Siddur. But actually, before, I realize we have about 8 minutes or so, but any questions, any comments really quickly before we continue? No? Okay. So we're going to turn back in our Siddur, Prayer for the Country. We're on page 177. Of all days, quite appropriate day for us to be praying for the United States of America. We're going to read the alternative prayer in the left-hand column. Our God and God of our ancestors, grant to our country the will and wherewithal to fulfill its calling to justice, liberty, and equality. May each of us fulfill our responsibilities of citizenship with care, generosity, and gratitude, ever conscious of the extraordinary blessing of freedom, ever mindful of our duties to one another. Bless those who volunteer to labor on behalf of us all. May they find the strength and courage to complete their tasks and fulfill their dreams. May our judges, elected leaders, and all who hold public office exercise their responsibilities with wisdom, fairness, and justice for all. Fill them with love and kindness, and bless them that they may walk with integrity on the paths of peace and righteousness. Creator and protector of all, watch over our armed forces and all those entrusted with our safety, as they daily put their lives at risk to protect us and our freedoms. Be with them in times of danger. Give them courage to act with honor and dignity, as well as insight to do what is right in your eyes. Fill us all with the gifts of love and courage, that we may create a world that reflects your glory. May we each respond to the charge of your prophet, for what does Adonai demand of you but to act justly, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. May the one who brings peace on high bring peace and prosperity to our world, and keep us in safety. And let us say, Amen. On page 178, we have a prayer for the state of Israel. Avinu Shebashamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'goalo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael Reshit Smichat Golatenu. Hagen Aleha Berat Chastecha, Ufros Aleha Sukat Shlomecha, Ushlach Orcha V'metcha L'Rosheha Sareha V'yoitzeha, V'taknem Be'etzah Tova Melfanecha, Chazek et Yidei Miknei Eretz Kodshenu, V'anchilem Eloheinu Yeshua, V'ater Netzachon Ta'atrem, Natata Shalom Ba'aretz, V'simchat Olam Yoshveha, V'nomar Amen. Turn to page 205, I believe. Page 205 for Aleinu. Invite everybody to rise. Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabech ladon hakol, latet gedula leotzer breshit, shelo asanu kugei haratzot, velo samanu kamishbachot adama, shelo sam chalkenu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, Lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu, shehu notei shamayim veyosed haaretz, u'moshev yekaro hashamayim ima'al, u'shchinatu zo, begovhei meromim, hu Eloheinu heinod, emet malkeinu efes ulato, kakatu b'torato, V'yadata hayom v'hashevota el levavecha, ki Adonai hu Elohim b'shamayim mima'al, v'yal haaretz mitachat einod. Kakatu b'toratecha, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, v'nemar, v'haya Adonai, l'melech al kol haaretz, v'yom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. Turn to page 207 for Kaddish Yatom, the Mourner's Kaddish. This Shabbat, we lovingly recall the memory of Dina Sneh. It's 4 years. Irving Taxerman, Miriam Weisberg, Pauline Paja Balfour, Peachy Cummings, Maurice J. Siegel, and Sidney Friedman. I'd like to invite all those who have a need or desire to say Kaddish to mute yourself, and anybody else who would like to unmute yourself as well to be able to say Amen so we can hear your Amens. Again, it will be cacophonous, but at least it won't be so different than being in an Orthodox minyan. But this way we can actually all hear one another and be able to say Amen to one another. Page 207, Kaddish Yatom. Gadal v'yitadash
Shemei Rabbah. Amen.
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 Hey, Shmei Rabba Vorach,
Viet Barak V'Yishtabak Viet Ba'ar. Mam Viet Naseh.
Talal Shemei Dekud Shab
Richu.
Eila Mikol. Shirata. Tushta.
Amen.
Rabba Min Shemaya Chaim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'Meru
Amen.
Amen.
Yes, Shalom.
Shalom B'Mramav. Hu Yaseh Shalom. Aleinu V'Yakol Yisrael V'Yakol Yoshvei Tevel. Amen.
Amen.
James, I'm glad that you're with us. I didn't see you there. It was nice hearing your voice. We have a few. Here, back up, Kira. You see on my lap? Okay. So, we have a number of birthdays this week, starting on Monday with Adine Friedman. Birthday to Adine. We also have Pierre-Andre Lowenstein has a birthday this week. Brian Purcell has a birthday this week. I have a birthday this week. It's true. And Linda Brookman does as well. So, happy birthday, everybody. And we have a few anniversaries. So Karen Height and George Zook have their anniversary tomorrow. Phil and Hannah Bell have their anniversary, same day as my birthday, on Wednesday. And then Shuli and Asaf Lotan are celebrating their 15th anniversary on Thursday. So Mazal Tov to everybody who's celebrating. Any other simchas that we're celebrating? Anybody want to share? Feel free to just unmute yourself and share simcha if you wish.
Everyone muted.
Yeah, everyone's muted. Nobody? No one has any simchas?
Got a paper?
I would like to say that it's a beautiful day outside. It's a strange 4th of July, but it's wonderful that we can be together. And happy 4th. Stay safe. Wear your masks.
And any other? Yeah, Jaime. Oh, he's just taking off his talit. Any other simchas? Yes, Mary.
I'm very grateful that my cousin's son, who lives in New York, was able to come out before he goes to boot camp for ROTC. And so we sat in the yard, social distance. We had bagels and lox, and we social distanced in the backyard. It was a gift to be able to see him.
It's wonderful. I wish lots of luck in Ratzi. Any other? Okay, then I guess I'll turn it over to Cindy. Madam President, some announcements.
Good Shabbos. Thank you to Rabbi Botnick for letting us join him on his very short vacation and for his wonderful Shabbat services every week. We received about 65 responses to our High Holy Days survey from both members and non-members who have been involved with Mishkan for the holidays. We're now reviewing the responses to see what people think about our options. The following Zoom classes continue this week. Stephanie Avedon's yoga tomorrow morning at 9. Jeffrey Prince's Songs for the Jewish Soul tomorrow morning at 11. Rachel Can's Zumba Monday morning at 9. Rabbi Dan's Prophets Monday evening at 7:30. And Rabbi Botnick's Torah study Tuesday afternoon at 2. Check the messenger or the website for more information and for the Zoom one-click. This week, we will be sending out membership renewal notices by email and regular mail. Renewing everyone is crucial to Mishkan's continuing success and growth. So if you are in touch with other Mishkan members, please encourage them to respond when they get their mail and email. And please wait yourself until you receive your email or mail to renew. We need to make sure our systems are updated first. Now you can imagine that we're going downstairs for a yummy kiddush and schmoozing, followed by hugs and kisses before we all leave for home. From my mouth to God's ear, as they say. Good Shabbos.
Bezrat Hashem. So we'll turn to page 211 with the Adon Olam to end the service, and we'll do a fun melody for a fun melody for there we go, that's why. A fun melody for the 4th of July. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Ko Yitzir Nivra Le'et Nasa V'chefzo Kol Azai Melech Shmo Nikra V'yacharei Kichlot HaKol Levado Yimloch Nora V'hu haya v'hu hove v'hu yeh b'tifara v'hu echad v'ein sheni l'ham shelo l'hachbira ולי ראשית ולי תכלית, ולא העוז המשרה, והוא אלי וחי גורלי, וצורכב לי בעת צרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנת כוסי ביום אקרא, וידו אף כיד רוחי. והייתי שם וירא, ומוחי גביעתי, אדוני לי ולא יירא. די די דה דה די 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 דה 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 די די דה די דה 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 די דה די די די. Play ball. Good Shabbos, everybody. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
Happy birthday, Rabbi. Enjoy it.
Shabbat shalom. All right. Be well, everybody.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Shabbat shalom, everybody. I gotta go.
Jaime, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
You all good, Jeff?
We're good. Thank you.
Okay.
Got it.
Shabbat shalom.
Well, Shabbat shalom. Be well.
May the fourth be with you.
Happy 4th.
Blowing things up from things blowing up.
Yeah, stay away from exploding objects.
This is Mammoth in the background, by the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in the background. Good to see everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
Hope everybody's okay. Tom, all right?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I
Yes,
can hear
we
you.
can.
See you. Hear you. Very good. Everything all right?
Yeah, everything is good. We are not suffering. I feel bad. I feel guilty because there's so many people are, but
Yeah.
for us, it's okay.
And nobody blowing up things near your house?
Oh, well, that's not true. I don't know why they're blowing things up. It makes no sense, but.
All right.
And I'm happy that I'm able to go back to feeding the baby kittens out in the valley.
Oh, hooray.
Reopened on a very small scale because most of the kittens are out at foster, but we have one volunteer at a time, not the 4 that used to be, and we all distance and mask and so forth, but makes the kitties happy.
Did kitties get COVID?
Yes.
No, they don't.
Actually, that's not true. There were those tigers in the zoo that got COVID. There have been a few cats on the USDA website.
Did you say tigers?
Yes.
Well, the tigers are not Felis domesticus.
No, but there have been house cats as well. Very, very few. But if you look on the USDA website, the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, they have a section where they're tracking COVID in cats and dogs.
Well, they have much worse problems. They get what's called kitty Ebola, which is panleukopenia, which is what they.
Oh, that's really bad.
Yeah. So I'm masked. I won't give them anything.
So did they shut down the kitten feeding program for a while?
Well, they didn't. Even before the virus came along, they had decided to go over to a foster model because it's not really healthy for very young unvaccinated kittens to be all in the same room. I mean, they're in their separate litter with their litter in their separate cages, but disease can spread. So they went over to foster mostly even before, and then fortuitously, it was the right answer for now. So up until about 3 weeks ago, we had no opportunities to be volunteering, but in a small way, I fed 14 newborns, day before yesterday. So
they just do it for a little while till they can find a foster family for them?
Yeah, some of the kittens who are still left in the nursery tend not to they have health problems often, of one kind or another.
Really? What sort of health problems?
Well, diarrhea, upper respiratory, something. A bad eye that's going to have to get taken out, various things. So they're not prime foster candidates at the moment.
Oh dear. Well,
Although the ones
hopefully-
I took care of were all seemed fine, so.
we're having a problem with our smoke detector. Jeff's disabling it. There's no fire, but it's been
Smoke alarm?
been freaking out lately.
It's got too much stuff.
Wow. Ha. Maybe it's celebrating the 4th.
Oh, yeah, it's really
got-
obnoxious.
It needs to
It's
be
got
dusted.
dust in it and it thinks it's smoke or some dumb thing. No.
So how are you guys?
Good.
Apart from the smoke alarm?
As far as the smoke alarm, well, my life actually is pretty similar because they declared, I guess you wouldn't have known, the medical center director we have now at the beginning of the whole pandemic, when the governor gave the shelter at home order, he sent around an email that he considers all of us to be essential employees. We're all supposed to be coming to work. We have a special memo to carry with us when we're driving to and from work, just in case we ever get stopped. I call it my get out of jail free card. Some people are working remotely. We have some people who have health issues, so we got permission for them to telework. And we had one large office that had 5 people in it. And we set up for them to telework. So one person each day is in the office while the rest work remotely. But I'm still going into work every day, and there's so few people around me now. It's actually much safer going to work than to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Jeff is working from home. UCLA sent him home originally until September 11th, and then last week an email came through from UCLA that everybody who's working at home successfully, now they want you to stay at home until January 4th. It's just, the whole thing's going on and on and on.
So how does he like working at home?
It's fine, except, I mean, it's the same work, except we've got 60 COVID projects. 60,
count them.
Huh?
So we got a lot of COVID data coming in.
Do you mind being at home?
What?
Do you mind being at home?
No, it's the same work. So I sit in front of a computer writing code.
Yeah, I know, but
My office, I sat in front of a computer writing code. Well, what difference does it make? I mean,
are you lonesome?
Oh, and he really misses the commute.
Yeah, well, whatever.
Uh,
I'm just saying. I mean, we have the staff meetings are now on Zoom instead of in person. That's all. We still have staff meetings, except they're on Zoom. I still have meetings with all my collaborators, except they're on Zoom.
uh-huh.
I taught a whole class last spring on Zoom. You know, it was annoying. Some of my students, I never saw their face once. They wouldn't show me their face. And even they have to do presentations at the end of the class. So they all did their presentations and they had, PowerPoint slides. And even then, 2 of them wouldn't show their face. So I have one of them who has from my point of view, an exotic Asian name. I don't mean that to sound prejudiced. I never even knew their gender.
Even from their voice.
Because I couldn't tell.
Maybe they feel they need a haircut and they don't want to be seen.
Maybe, I don't know, but it was very weird teaching a class on Zoom when you can't see. I could be boring them to death. They could be afraid of saying they're sitting in their living room lighting up a bong.
You wouldn't know.
Or having a huge, gigantic, glass of Jim Beam or something in front of them because I'm such a miserable lecturer, but you have no feedback. So only about half of them would let me see how they were reacting.
Wow, that would be hard.
It's like a comedian doing his shtick and not knowing if anybody's laughing. So it was strange. And I have to do it again in the fall, so that'll be weird.
Well,
but other than that, it's exactly the same.
Is Amy still there?
Yes, indeed, I'm still here.
How are you?
I'm actually furloughed from work with Permanente, which is fine with me.
Okay, thank you.
But I still work I do reviews for the California Medical Board as a consultant, and we have a big hearing coming up, which I'll be participating in via Zoom. Also, the academic year hasn't started for the UCLA Medical School. I teach in the second year doctoring program, And that's all going to be online. That's where we use actors as surrogate patients. And,
Right.
yeah.
Wow.
So, and I like you, sometimes I feel guilty because it's not been very hard on me. I find the activities that I do to be quite satisfactory, actually.
Good.
Probably walk more now than I ever do in my life. I'll be going up to Mammoth with my daughter, hopefully, if they'll take us sometime this summer. For a while, they weren't accepting. They were closed down, not because they have COVID. They have no COVID, but they don't want to get it from the infected people of Los Angeles and San Francisco. But they've reopened, and we usually will stay in a cabin, maybe a condo or something. My camping days are over. But no, I've encountered in my life way more than a dozen bears. So
I was surprised that he said it was a brown bear because
it's not a brown
like
bear.
a grizzly.
It's a black bear. It's a black bear.
It just was a very pale.
Black bears are brown and sometimes even blonde. It refers to the species of bear, not really the color. So there are no brown bears in California.
Right.
There are no real brown bears, meaning grizzlies. There are
except on the flag.
Oh,
on the flag.
You killed them all. Well, wait, I thought that flag was the California golden bear that's totally extinct.
Yeah, that's a different thing. But I don't think they have those either. So yeah, I think serious attacks by bears. I've had bears come and steal my food and get up on their hind legs and chase me away. It is pretty frightening, but overall pretty harmless. I think one of the only, if not the only attack, that was fatal attack in North America by a black bear was with a guy who was trying to get a selfie with the bear.
What a turkey. Darwin at work there.
Yeah.
So what's this hearing with the California Medical Association?
The California Medical Board, not the
man.
California Medical Association. That's, I'm a paid consultant, meaning when they have a case against the doctor, I'm the, I don't work for the medical board, but they pay me to do a thorough review of the case and testify if need be.
I see, okay. And then you're furloughed off UCLA for the moment? Is that what you
No,
mean?
from Kaiser, I'm furloughed.
Oh, really?
I was working for a while remotely, but there was nothing to do. And I even felt embarrassed getting paid for what amounted to 2 to 3 phone calls a day. The number of visits to primary care doctors has dramatically dropped. Maybe it's picking up a little now. But people aren't coming in for the routine stuff. And think about it, the isolation not only prevents COVID, prevents all respiratory infections, including, bronchitis, flu, exacerbations of asthma, all these things. So there's just a lot less work to do. And people don't really want to come into the doctor's offices for aches and pains, which of course we understand. Maybe they never needed to, but that.
Well, I can tell you, they are still not scheduling elective procedures because I called to try and schedule one and they told me they weren't doing those yet. And I did go and see my doctor for an ache and pain, namely one of my feet was hurting and swollen. And
that's more than an ache and pain. It's swollen. Yeah.
Swollen and hurting, and I was able to get an appointment the very next day.
Yeah, no, I saw my dermatologist for a couple of skin cancers.
Oh, well, those gotta go.
Well, yeah, but that's not an emergency. But I'm just But the primary care medicine is being rethought. That maybe even after COVID ends, there may be changes in the way we do things.
Well, I have heard stories about for something that can be done over Zoom or FaceTime. It can actually be much more convenient for people. They don't have to hassle with transportation. They can do it on a break from work if it's just like a little 10-minute thing. They don't need to
Video visits, yeah, that's been going on for quite a while. But people generally haven't taken to it that well. Now they are.
Yes, they are, and it's apparently doing well. But I also hear, especially we had some talk at the VA recently, there's some things that does not seem to work for, especially like working with PTSD patients. They really need to come in person. Over Zoom
Right.
doesn't cut it for them. And obviously you can't do blood draws through Zoom. I mean, some things you just have to come in for.
Well, yeah, but then you don't need necessarily to sit in a waiting room. You go to a lab and then communicate online or in person after that. There's also a generational thing, the value of, let's say, the doctor-patient relationship, or simply the being physically present with another human being, is maybe looked upon differently in a generational way. Of course, there's a lot of overlap, but we see the physical presence, the laying on of the hands, all that is very important. A lot of young people don't appreciate it, at least to nearly the same degree.
Well, their whole lives have been on phones and so on. That's why.
Oh, exactly.
They're used to it.
Remember how we used to listen to music
Yes.
together in dorm rooms, maybe smoking a little, who knows? But, together, going to concerts,
Yeah.
as opposed to the hoodie and the earphones and,
Yeah.
it was a group experience. It's now become an individual experience. Everything's becoming an individual experience,
Not bad.
except a few certain things that can't.
Right.
So Tom and I have physicals scheduled for July, and we are thinking of canceling them because who needs the exposure? But you could get blood work drawn, and that's probably a good thing. But how do they listen to your heart? How do they listen to your lungs? That kind of thing.
Well, okay, that's a very valid question. It depends whether it depends on what you're coming for, your age. The actual listening to of the heart and lungs, which are probably the most important part of the exam, as a routine thing, has very, very low yield. And this is something that long before COVID, you don't need there's no benefit from a doctor putting a stethoscope on your chest once a year. Maybe once in every 5 years, that's a different matter. The blood work probably has more benefit. But I think that again, this is my personal thing, and obviously I'm biased. I think personally, meeting with one's doctor, having a conversation, talking about health issues in your life, the back and forth is very helpful, because the day may come when you do get sick. Well, the day always comes when you do, and then to have a person you connect with in a certain way, I see as a very valuable thing. But
you could do that by Zoom, though, couldn't you?
Can you really establish a relationship with Zoom?
Well, if you have somebody you already had a relationship with, you don't have
Exactly. Like us right now, we already know each other. We're not meeting each other for the first time. Yeah, and that's where the video visits and stuff like that works well. When you already have an existing relationship, and to do at least some of those visits not being in person is good. There are all kinds of obstacles, because insurance payments, Medicare payments are all built around the physical visit. The actual visit is what they pay for. They don't pay for telephone calls. They don't pay for video. That's starting to change.
So if I said, I'd like to cancel you, just give me an order for blood work, can we talk? That would be actually disadvantageous to the doctor.
It might be, and rightfully so. I mean, okay, I want you to spend your time doing stuff for free, but the stuff that we would normally be paid for, paid for on your behalf by someone else, that we don't want anymore. So, but we want you to do this. Yeah. I mean, you could say, I wonder if I could get my tests and maybe feel more comfortable if I could put off the actual visit for a few months. But I think going into the doctor's office is safe. I went for that dermatology appointment. They're pretty careful these days.
Well, that's more necessary. I mean, I'm only going because a year has gone by and, it's a habit. But I'm wondering if UCLA doctors, Jeff, are you there? Do you know?
He just went downstairs to get something to eat. What was your question?
Well, I just wonder if UCLA doctors, I know that, it's billed by the UCLA medical practice group, but would the doctor simply be unpaid if my insurance wasn't keen for this sort
Well,
of thing? Or
maybe the doctor
less than
would be
salary?
paid, but perhaps UCLA wouldn't be paid.
Okay.
And that's also an issue. We want our universities to actually be there. But all this could be changed. It could, that could be a billable event, and maybe already it has. I don't know.
I did hear something about Medicare changing its rules on that stuff. And
Correct.
But also, yeah. And we'll finish your sentence.
No, because also Medicare would not previously pay for anything done over the telephone. Part of the way Medicare pays large organizations like Kaiser is on the disease burden, meaning the diagnoses that your patients have. Obviously, a 75-year-old with 15 diagnoses should pay more than a 65-year-old person who's on no meds and has maybe one or two. But the only way they allow you to record that for billing is in an in-person visit. And, I think they're looking to change that, but it takes a long time to change these things.
Oh, I guess I misunderstood. I wasn't under the impression they'd already changed it. I know over at the VA, they're really pushing telehealth. They've increased telehealth visits by, I don't know, like 800% or something.
Sure. Well, the VA is paid I think by global budgeting. So they don't lose money by that. Yeah.
Now, your point about young people who grew up seeing everything on screens and don't feel the need for in-person visits and stuff, there's a dark side to that. Some months ago, there was a piece about young people saying they were, in fact, talking to a psychiatrist who works on student mental health at USC, who's one of the people they're talking to. And he said, now he has these students come to him and say, I don't know how to make friends. These are college-age kids who say, I don't know how to make friends. How do I make friends? How do you do it? And he said, before 5 years ago, they never got those kind of questions. It's like social skills aren't being developed because you just can't do that so easily through your cell phone.
Right.
And they sit at the table with a bunch of other young people and they're all relating to their phone, not to each other.
Yes.
Yeah. As far as how often you need to see your doctor for a routine visit, I didn't mean to suggest that no one needs an annual physical. I mean, if you're over 60, that's one thing. It is a good idea to be seen, at least one. I personally think I'm biased, but if you're 30 years old, to have to come in every year, public health authorities and people who study it say that is really of virtually no value.
Oh, very interesting. Thank you for the insight there.
No, that's been for a long time. The United States Public Health Task Service and others, they do not recommend yearly physical exams. Even the very conservative American Medical Association says, well, certain things need to be done periodically, certain tests, but even they no longer recommend a yearly physical exam. But again, once you're over 60, chances are you have things to talk about. Or if you have chronic illnesses, chances are you have stuff to talk about. But
Okay, because last year I actually tried to schedule an annual physical because I thought I was supposed to. And when I went on my Kaiser account, it said there you only need these once every 5 years. You're not due for one.
No, that's something else. That's called a Medicare wellness exam. And that was set up by the government and that was set up by in a way to help primary care physicians. It's meant for generally poor, less educated, somewhat isolated seniors, people who are on multiple medicines but are not sure what they're supposed to be taking, who have hearing problems, who have, all kinds of stuff that usually doesn't apply to you. So it's a comprehensive routine checkup that Medicare pays for. The thing I'm talking about, you don't have to call it a physical exam. You could just say, I just want a visit to meet with my doctor once a year.
Okay, because when I went on the website, what I read was it said you only need a regular full physical once every 5 years. So I didn't schedule.
Well, maybe no one needs to look in your ears, but no, it's not really the average person at Kaiser, I think, has 3 visits a year. So, but you don't need a special visit called a physical per se.
Okay. Well, they do remind me of certain things I need, like they nagged me to get my pap smear, and now I have to go and get my mammogram. I mean, certain routine things they are still doing, and other elective things they're postponing.
But if you wanted to meet with your doctor, I just want to meet and talk, even talk about aches and pains, or let's go over my medicines again, or I've heard this, is it true? Something that might affect you. I think that's a good thing. Again, I'm expressing this as my personal opinion, and this is what I see people do act on. That's good medical care. That's not like, every time you feel a cold coming in to be checked, so.
Okay, well, thank you for the explanation, because I was a little confused.
No, you shouldn't hesitate to arrange a visit. You don't have to call it a physical.
Okay. Well, I don't have anything else except to follow up on my foot if it doesn't resolve in another week. So other than that, things are okay.
So you don't take any medications?
I have eye drops because I may have incipient glaucoma, and I have a follow-up exam at the end of August to see how the eye drops are doing. And I'm very happy with my ophthalmologist. We talked about scientific papers. Last time I was there, I gave him my recent issue of Science magazine that had a really cool piece about lowering vision in people with retinitis pigmentosa. Anyway, I'm super happy with my ophthalmologist.
But I'm not going to ask how old you are, but it is
very. I'll be 64 at the end of August.
Right. There are very few people over 60 there are few people over 60 who are on no oral medications. That's the exception rather than the rule. So you're a bit of an outlier there. Are on something for high blood pressure or gout or this or that.
No, well, I try to eat a healthy diet every day. I don't do it every day, but I try. I try to exercise every day. I have a Fitbit. I try to ideally, I'm not doing it right now while my foot's weird. I try to take a 30-minute brisk walk every day, and I drag Jeff with me. I try to do the 10,000 steps a day. I do core exercises. I try to, I said, try to eat a healthy diet. I do all those things.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of eating healthy, I'm going to say goodbye and go eat something healthy.
Okay, that sounds good. I actually have to go to another Zoom with my family soon anyway.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom. Happy 4th.
All right, so I'm going to end the